Greetings and welcome to the 68th episode of Retro Rant. After the delicious street hustle, it is time for some Amstrad CPC fun, taking a look at a recent game, The Sword of Ianna, released by Retroworks in 2020 following the Spectrum and MSX releases. It requires the hardware add-on called the Dandanator to try, but thankfully the Retro Virtual Machine emulator supports that, so anyone can enjoy this game. The Sword of Ianna is a game similar to Prince of Persia with fiendish platform action and sword fights, but it also introduces some light RPG elements. If you haven't seen the Prince of Persia review, I am a great fan of this game, so it is only natural that I would leap at the opportunity to play a similar game on my emulated Amstrad. Some centuries ago, when humanity was plagued by different evils than the coronavirus, the goddess Ianna chose a champion and blessed him with her sword, which he happily used to rip the evil creatures into ribbons. Now this evil is reborn, and you control a barbarian aptly named Yarkum, who must prove himself worthy of the goddess's favor, not by making donations to temples or handing conversion pamphlets, but by managing to gather the various pieces of the Sword of Ianna, hopefully restoring it to its original form, so as to deal with the evil for good this time. The graphics of the Sword of Ianna are, well, going to remind you of the good old, okay, not so good Spectrum port days. The difference here is that, for a specky port, the visuals look quite decent, without suffering from the slowdowns which were the norm in such ports. The various locations are well drawn, and the various sprites, although monochromatic, move quite smoothly with a respectable amount of animation frames. This is a good compromise, although I cannot but feel jealous of the MSX version, imagining a CPC splash of color in the game. But I guess that would mean running the game in a different resolution, so I am happy with the result as it is. I disliked the garish color choices in some of the levels, which made my eyes bleed. The sound of the Sword of Ianna is simply amazing, making the AY truly sing. It was composed by Joe McAlby, who, according to my search, was involved with some classic Infogrames games such as North and South. I hope I am not mixing him up with some other person. Each level has an awesome tune, and each one of these tunes has a very good amount of length, so as not to get repetitive. These tracks are perfect for the slashy, epic action of the game, and I continually found myself just stopping and enjoying them. Some sound effects are present as well, offering some decent metallic sounds. The controls are a mixed bag. Although the game offers a lot of moves and the use of the second button for entering battle mode, I found that there are lots of inconsistencies that detract from the experience. For starters, Ianna is a split-screen affair. But a lot of the pitfalls appear right after changing the screen, so if you're running into the next screen and expect to do a ton of running, you will suffer a frustrating, unfair death because of a pit appearing right next to the start of the screen. This is a really bad decision to make, especially considering that the levels of Ianna are pretty big and there is a huge amount of backtracking involved. There are some diabolical moving platforms, but you cannot stand on them while they move. Instead, they make you fall when they move, and this makes for even more frustrating falling deaths. Item using is also inconsistent and confusing. You have an inventory which you can access by pressing H, but you can only use the potions there. The important items, like the keys, are either used automatically or you have to be in a specific place and press down. Needless to say, I am not a fan of this. As mentioned previously, you have a lot of moves. But especially for the combat, you will end up using only one of them, since all of the game's fighting can be done by avoiding and hitting, rinse and repeat, creating a samey feeling. Jumping is also inconsistent in the game, since sometimes you have to do a long jump, but sometimes you hit the ceiling and fall to your death, and sometimes you pass right through the ceiling making the jump. Another jumping problem is that sometimes after a long jump, if you simply press up, the hero, instead of jumping vertically, does another long jump, often with fatal results. All these problems might sound minor, but the Sword of Ianna contains some pixel-perfect platforming parts, and the lack of solid, consistent controls makes the game even more difficult and frustrating than it already is. Apart from the controls, the game is huge, the levels are big and fun to explore, with some fiendish obstacles along the way, requiring to use your head as well as your steel. Unfortunately, the graphics do not help much, since sometimes the detailed backgrounds end up being messy and confusing, and you will find yourself missing, for example, walls that you can smash. I am also not a fan of the blind jumps which are required in Ianna, which are necessary for progress in a few places. There is also a satanic puzzle in which you must push some levers according to a code, but when you are sure you have found the code, it changes, so you have to figure it out again. I simply hated this part, and I can't find any reason why the developers did this apart from sadism. You have no lives, but when you die you respawn from a checkpoint, but these are also not very well placed, since there are some places where there is a checkpoint every few screens and other places where there is no checkpoint for miles, and you have to complete dozens of screens before reaching the blessed check screen. The checkpoint remembers your health and experience, but this is not a good idea because sometimes you reach a checkpoint with only a thin sliver of health remaining, so each time you respawn you will have only that puny amount of health, so sometimes you're better off just restarting the level from scratch. Thankfully, there are health potions and chicken legs around the place, so you can replenish your hit points. Also, thankfully, there is a password system so that you don't have to play the game from the beginning each time. Overall, with all of this ranting, you must think I hate this game. Yet this is not the case at all. Maybe because I am a huge Prince of Persia fan, maybe because of the fantastic music and atmosphere, I persevered with Ianna and found it to be a very enjoyable game. It is a flawed gem, and I feel with some tweaking it could have been one of the best exploration platform games on this system. If you like Prince of Persia and have a high frustration tolerance for platform games, I can definitely recommend this game. If not, well, give it a try, it might lure you in. So that's it for now, and I'll see you next time.